It's kind of really hard when you're starting out. You're sort of looking at everyone and everyone wants to direct, and you're a bit like, well, what would make me the person to do that? I'm not very crafty, I'm not very technically savvy, but I really love being with people and making something together. At one point, I had to recognize that I had to let go of an idea of like whether other people thought I was doing a good job or looking professional. I just had to let go of this idea and be like, I know what I need to do and I'm going to do it and not be driven by how the other people on set are thinking about me. I'd love to see what we all made if it was like, you're fine, you can survive. Like, what do you really want to spend your time researching and making? And are there different things that we would start to make if it wasn't always about bigger budgets, more reach?
Welcome to the podcast, Sophie Hyde.
Thanks, Kirsty. Nice to be here.
You're a director, writer, and producer working across both film and television. And you have so many awesome credits under your belt, including 52 Tuesdays, which was your debut feature for which you won the Best Directing Award at Sundance, as well as a Crystal Bear at Berlin. The Hunting, which has won multiple actor awards, and Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, which had several BAFTA and Golden Globe nominations. And now you're just about to release Jimpa into theatres this month.
Yeah, well, sounds like I've been alive a long time, or it feels like it.
I've known you through most of that time, and looking back over your career, it feels like it's really had this beautiful trajectory. Did you originally intend to be a director, or was that something that came over time?
I think I always wanted to be a director. Like, I did youth theatre when I was growing up, and I was acting and sort of feeling like I wasn't made for that. And I fortunately had like people in my life at the time who were professional directors and designers and producers and stuff like that, because that's what youth theatre was like then. And so I was kind of aware of these people, and I knew that I kind of fit into that realm. And I even started directing like theatre when I was there. But honestly, it took a long time to then be like, I am a director. I went, oh, I'm interested in film. I want to understand it and explore it and do theory. And I found it hard to work out what the paths were or what it even meant really to be a film director. It's kind of really hard when you're starting out. You're sort of looking at everyone and everyone wants to direct, and you're a bit like, well, what would make me the person to do that? And I think, it's really easy to fall into the like, oh, I could be organized and I could arrange things and lean into things that you're comfortable with. It wasn't until I made 52 Tuesdays, which was a fair way into working. Like, I'd made a lot of documentaries and shorts and things like that. And so I was making my first feature. It wasn't until that I was like, I am like, this is what I want to do. This is what I will do in my life. And in fact, it's sort of embarrassing to say, but winning that directing award at Sundance, like, I didn't go into that room thinking I had any idea that I could potentially win something at Sundance. I was there and I was like, there's awards. Oh, how great. Oh my God, imagine the cast won like an ensemble award. But I just had no idea. But a moment like that, it does do something for you where you go, oh, they're saying that the thing that you did on this is worth something. And there are moments where you just do require that outside assurance or something. So yes, I always thought I was a director, and no, I never thought I was a director.
And when you said the person that was going to be the director could be you, why do you think it ended up being you?
Yeah, why did it end up being me? Yeah, we work as a group of us that all kind of worked together and did for a long time. And at first, I feel like we were just making films together. We were kind of dividing by what we were good at and sort of taking different bits of the reign and, supporting each other. I enjoy working with actors, and I really love that bit where we're coming together to make something. And I love to guide and work with other people to do things. In some ways, what I think I'm saying is I'm not very good actually at doing anything myself, but I'm really good at telling other people what bits they might want to do, or leading them, or sort of, guiding them towards something. I'm not very crafty, I'm not very technically savvy, but I really love being with people and making something together. That became the thing that took me there. And it's funny because directing kind of has a little bit of a mystique about it or something. But in so many ways, you are, like, the word directing is, you are just sort of pointing everyone towards something and asking for things from someone. But it's just your job. Like, it's not like because you're the god of this thing. It's just like your job is to do that.
And I think it's beautiful that you have come up with this collective Closer Productions and you all supported each other's work. And I know you've written and you've produced across projects as well. But what is that balance of producer, director, writer in the work that you've done?
I largely like working with other writers, to be honest. So Matt Cormack, who I work with the most, his work and his craft is in writing, and he's very good at it, and I rely really heavily on him. It used to be that it was like we might have a conversation and an idea together, and then he would write it. And over time, we've dabbled in different versions of that where I'm more involved in kind of crafting the story, more involved in the characters, and sometimes writing into the scripts as well. So I feel like I work as a writer a lot, even though I wouldn't call myself solely a writer, and I probably wouldn't write a film on my own. So that part is interesting. The producing and directing division is much harder to kind of quantify. I love producing because I think it's really important that when you're asking people to rely on you the way they do when you're making a film, that you have some control over how they're presented and the kind of financial agreements that you make and the creative agreements that you make. And so I think being a producer is really important in that conversation to make sure that what you're promising is able to be achieved. And that comes from, sort of background in documentary where that was really necessary. Nowadays I produce my own films, but I rely again on other really amazing producers to work with me because I can't do it when I'm in the middle of the making. I need some separation at certain times, but I really want to help with financing and I really want to be part of the ongoing conversations about the release. I do produce sometimes documentaries that I'm not directing, and that's just because I really believe in it and I believe in trying to find a way to make it work. I think primarily I am a director. That's what I want to do, or a filmmaker, I suppose. Yeah. And so you step in wherever you need to.
And have you recognized a common thread across the projects you've worked on across your career? Are you able to put a definition on it?
I try. I feel like the end of a lot of my films are all about freedom and like trying to find a kind of freedom inside culture. Not a rejection of things necessarily, but a kind of how to live well inside of the thing that you have, your life. I think all my films are really very political, but not big P politics. Like they're not outspoken necessarily in their politics. They're very intimate and personal. And that's just how I think. I'm always hoping that there's a space with a cinema for you to watch something and see something new, but also think about your own life and then talk about it. And so I guess there's that kind of hope or that kind of reach in my work, that it's driven by emotions, but that you can engage with it with your mind and your thoughts about your own life. Intimate is the only word that ever kind of keeps coming up. It's intimate. And I am slightly obsessed with intimacy, I think.
And that intimacy, is it in the way that you work with cast? Is it in the types of stories you tell?
It's certainly in the kinds of stories I tell. I think I'm always exploring what it means to be intimate in different ways, like, of course, sexually, but also as a parent and a child, or between two friends, oftentimes, or what it means to be intimate with people, or hold responsibility for them that you're not super close to. And it's certainly in the way that I work as well, occasionally in a much too intense way. Like I like the team and the world to be very close. And I ask for a kind of great deal of openness and I offer it back. And it's a part of what I do. It's sort of where I think of the work coming from, is by kind of cracking something open between us as makers. That certainly happens with the actors. And I'm lucky that a lot of my collaborators are people that I've known for a long time. And, Matt, who I was talking about, who writes with me, we grew up together. And Brian, who shoots and edits most of the films, is my partner, father of my child. My child is in Jimpa Ord. But so it's not just that it feels like we're a family, because we are. It also feels like that feeling of creation works best for me when it feels like we're indebted and responsible for each other, I suppose.
And would you say that's been your way of creating that freedom within the culture of filmmaking for yourself?
Yeah, I guess so. Like, certainly one thing I'm really grateful for in my life is that together with the people I work with, we've gone how do we create the things that we want to create and the life that we want without necessarily having to like leave and go somewhere else, or trying to find ways for us to do that in a way that, yeah, is seeking out a kind of freedom, but within the parameters and the restrictions that we have.
And I think that's the universal challenge of being a filmmaker and wanting to create something that you truly believe in, right? And if you're outside a core production hub like we are in Adelaide, I really looked up to you as an inspiration because you were one of the people that showed that it's possible to succeed globally from Adelaide and do the thing that you wanted to do.
Yeah, and I remember that feeling of, when I started out, it felt like everyone left to kind of make things. You had to go, and there was the kind of go to Hollywood or go to Sydney or Melbourne. And I didn't necessarily want to feel like that had to be the way. And in some ways, I think I feel so grateful being here and having the life that we have and kind of trying to make from afar, is interesting because you do have this gorgeous kind of separation that exists where you are like in your own little bubble. It also makes things slower, I think. Like, we're not around, all the time with people that are making decisions, people that have money. I think there's good and bad of this. Creatively, it's been really, I think, really good for me, and I feel like I'm happy that I stayed. I always think if you move somewhere else, if you go somewhere else, you may just end up kind of on a treadmill of being efficient and needing to survive. I mean, I think we all have that here too, but somehow we've also been able to make choices for ourselves here. I guess it's where you grow up.
Speaking of some of those choices from a craft perspective, I think a lot of people assume that directing is almost that natural talent. You just show up and make decisions and tell people what to do, as we were talking about. Were there any particular skills along the way that you recognized that you wanted to hone, and how did you go about learning them?
Yeah, what an amazing, great question. Like, such a thing that I really need to think about. Um, When I first made my first short film that was with actors, I felt like really nervous. I'd worked with actors because I grew up doing drama, so I knew actors, but I hadn't actually had to lead them. And I was bringing in some people to work with me that were on TV and on films and in theatre, and so were working a lot more than me. And at the beginning of directing, that fear that you can have of like everyone's more experienced than you is quite pronounced. And I remember I went and met with my friend Daisy, who's a theatre director, and I was like, "Can you give me some exercises from theatre that I could do? Do you know, like, what sort of things?" And she talked to me a bit about what kind of feeling do you want them to have, and she gave me a couple of really simple exercises that I worked with a bit, and I'm sure those actors would be like, "Oh god, we were just doing some theatre games." But weirdly, it opened something in me that has really continued, which is I don't have a kind of process or a kind of a learnt way of directing or working with actors that I kind of rely on. I don't come from any sort of tradition, but I do sit and think, what feeling do I want to create in this, or what relationship am I looking to make with these people, or for them to tap into, and I just make stuff up. Like, I genuinely just go like, oh, what do I want to do? I'll try this. And the thing I've learned is to get in a room and see if it's working, and sometimes it's not, and you just change and you just shift it, and I feel more comfortable with that now. Yeah, so it came originally from Daisy and the kind of theatre and dance makers that I had known, but I guess taking it and just going, how do I find the confidence, I think it is, to sort of sit with something that isn't obvious and isn't you're not sure of. You're never going into a room going like, I know exactly what to do and these are the techniques and I can just do them. It's always a like feel it out, change it as you go. That sort of requires me to be okay with not always coming across well or seeming like a bit of a fool, or there are things like that that I've learnt to do. At one point I had to recognize that I had to let go of an idea of like whether other people thought I was doing a good job or looking professional. I just had to let go of this idea and be like, I know what I need to do and I'm going to do it, and not be driven by how the other people on set are thinking about me. So these are all learnt things for sure. And I'm really lucky that I have people I work with who I trust a lot and who look after me in that way. A lot of it is just a kind of trust in that. And I do think there's still, I do think that scary part of stepping onto a set and being like, "I could be the least experienced person here," is terrifying and continues through your career because you make less than other crew members most of the time, certainly less than the other actors.
And when you get to the point where you're working with cast who are at this A-list level and internationally renowned, I mean, just to go through some of the people you've worked with, you directed Tilda Cobham Harvey. Again, it was her feature debut in 52 Tuesdays as well, and she's gone on to have a wonderful career. Emma Thompson in Good Luck to You, Leo Grande. Kate Box, Asher Keddy, Richard Roxburgh, and now Olivia Colman and John Lithgow in Jimpa, along with your own child, Ord. It's a pretty phenomenal lineup of cast.
Yeah, so brilliant and all just, like, so gorgeous to work with, and I love cast when they're kind of new and fresh, and I had a brilliant time on 52 Tuesdays because we were sorta doing it together, like, working out, "Ooh, if we try this, how will this feel?" And I certainly was working with a group of actors who I felt would explore and experiment with me and weren't judging me because they were new. So that was a huge benefit to me to have been able to make like that for a whole year. And then moving into working with cast who were more experienced and top of their game. There was that shift for me that was like, oh, these guys have a whole toolkit. Like they have such a big toolkit to draw on, and the craft and their skill is so massive. I don't have to lead them in the same way that I would with somebody who's a new actor. I need to just support a bit more. So what else could we do? You know, like what else can we come to? And then a lot of that is kind of finding a shared trust between you and a shared language. So for me, every actor that I work with, I'm trying to sort of determine the ways that they feel most comfortable working and whether they respond really well to words or movement or big conversations or not. And then trying to find a shared process that means we can step onto set and be really sure of each other or just have a shorthand with each other. But meeting those stars, like that day before that is also really terrifying because you think you just know how much power they have and you're like, oh my God, if this goes wrong, this is going to be a really hard film to make. But I've had a good time, thankfully, with the people that I've worked with. I think that could be very, very tricky.
So, what's that process like? Because on lower budget productions, when you are casting those newer actors, you have a lot of time in auditions and rehearsals to kind of get to know them and whether they're the right people. With those bigger cast, A, how are you approaching them and pitching the idea of coming to work with you in the first place? And then how have you built those relationships before arriving at set?
It happens differently on every film. So, for instance, I made a film called Animals and we cast Alia Shawkat and we just had a Zoom, you know, and I had to trust that the two women in that who were playing best friends would get along. We didn't have a room for a chemistry test or anything like that. And so then my job is to sort of feed them enough before we meet through kind of conversations, Zooms, or sending them things or asking them to do things, and then kind of creating the right atmosphere for them to step into. And that's difficult and a little bit wonky at times. I remember on that, it felt a little bit like, oh, how am I going to get these two to work in the right way together? But they did. I mean, they part of their job is to kind of work that out too, you know. With Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, Emma was cast before I came on. So I met the whole team, Emma included. So in some ways, it was like Emma had to approve me. We got along very well quickly, and that felt great. And then I needed to go through a process of like making sure that the work I wanted to make was the work that they all wanted to make as well. And that was important to me to kind of feel like what I was going to bring to it was needed and wanted. I made these surveys for them all, and they would give me the things back in those surveys of like what it was important to them in the story. But then I could also go in and shift and steer it towards the things that I was also interested in, as long as it kind of met their things. And I did a huge amount of research on that one. We only met, it was the middle of COVID. We had to fly over to Norwich and we were in lockdown and we couldn't meet for the first part. We were all doing remote pre in our like house in Norwich. And then I remember like we were going to meet Emma and Daryl the next day for rehearsal. So we had a week of rehearsals and we met on the street the night before and it was terrifying. She made it very clear to me within the first few hours of rehearsal. I mean, this is how great Emma is. She said something about me and my directing, or like basically said something that made me go like, "Oh, she trusts me." And she said it out loud. And so then this whole thing happens where you just like you're all you will feel good with each other. You just know that you're working towards something. She's very clever like that. And then Olivia, that was really hard to get her the script. I tried through some agencies, and it's someone at that level, they have to be kind of protected, I think, because otherwise they'd be reading a script every day. So it took a while, but I eventually had a great relationship with her. I think the thing with Olivia is she'd done a film where she hadn't felt great in the process. And I think because those big stars, they go between indie projects and then huge projects. And sometimes they feel like they're just being told to stand on a mark and do the thing that they do. And Emma always said, like, I just want to be directed. So often I'm not really directed. And I think Olivia was looking for that kind of process too, somebody that's going to get real intimate and really care about it. That's how she came on board. Again, like we just had a Zoom. She read the script, we had a Zoom, and she signed on. Then it was just logistics from that point of how do we actually make this work.
Yeah, it's so fascinating understanding how all of those mechanics work. And I would imagine potentially Olivia would have called Emma and said, hey, what was it like to work with Sophie? Do you know if that happened?
I don't know, but it doesn't hurt to have someone like Emma who has been so publicly kind of talked about the kind of process that we went through. And also, I think, did a performance that she's incredibly proud of. And it doesn't hurt to get your next actors on. Like all of us are just itching to work with people that we want to like explore things with and why we started doing it. So that helps a great deal.
Mm. I want to talk a little bit more about that because she has described Good Luck to You, Leo Grande as one of the most seminal experiences of her professional life, which is pretty incredible. And I think it probably comes back to that intimacy. I remember one of the things that she did talk about publicly was the fact that you had had a nude rehearsal, which you also participated in as a director. I mean, speaking of intimacy and vulnerability, that is probably a step much further than most people would expect to go in their directorial careers.
And also, like, I would not recommend that as a kind of normal process to do. And it was a very particular thing. Like, I remember when I was young, I thought to myself, if I'm asking someone to be naked, I should also be naked. And I thought that was like a thing. But later on, I definitely did not think that. I didn't think that was appropriate or something I would do. And I didn't all the way through that process, in fact, because Emma and Daryl have both said to me that they really wanted to work towards them being naked in the rehearsal room. I remember that because they needed to be naked in the film. It was a big part of the story. And they didn't want to feel like that in the middle of the first moment that they ever saw each other naked, they just like were on set and like film and all that awkwardness and uncomfortability would be there. And so we really got that because there's a feeling on set sometimes where you're like, everything's ready, drop your robes, go, that I find daunting. So that seems normal. So I was kind of working towards that in our rehearsal room. And Emma sort of challenged me one day with it. She was like, of course you'll be getting naked like that. And I was like, ha ha, jokes. She was like joking, of course. Like she kind of like pulled it back. And it just niggled into me in this way that was like, I actually think that is something that they're looking for. And it wasn't a process of like, let's get naked. And it wasn't seedy in the way that that sort of sounds to me. It was an exercise in, like, revealing and sharing parts of our bodies and the things that they had done in our lives. So it was very much about the kind of usefulness and what our bodies had meant to us. So it didn't at all feel like a striptease. It felt like a kind of uncovering of vulnerabilities and scars and things that had been amazing about our bodies and things that were troubling, and so by the time you're naked, it's you've met each other in this other way, you know? Mm. I can't imagine doing that in any of the other rehearsal rooms that I've ever led. Like it isn't a thing, but in that particular one, it felt really important, and those two really needed to own the set in a certain way and own their experience of like how they were using their bodies in that space and on screen. And so it was a big part of that. I mean, I put my clothes on relatively quickly, if I recall, and those two just ended up free and nude for a while.
Yeah, I love that though, as using the body as a way to access the almost greater intimacy of story and experience and connecting it back to what they needed to show up as on screen.
Yeah, it's like we forget sometimes about the body too. Like I think we come from a kind of Stanislavskian sort of drama technique, and a lot of it is psychological, and we do a lot of talking and a lot of thinking in the work that we all do. we sometimes do just forget that our bodies exist and they're part of the storytelling, and they reveal stuff even when we don't think they are. So it's really an important part of filmmaking to me, is that kind of like, how is the body part of this conversation? How is it used?
This episode of We Interrupt This Broadcast is sponsored by AFTRS, the Australian Film, Television and Radio School. For more than 50 years, AFTRS has been working with our industry, always delivering incredible education and training to our Australian storytellers. So if you're looking for a full-time course or a short course, if you want to be on campus or online, anywhere in Australia, AFTRS has a course that's going to suit you.
So Jimpa, your most recent work, is a more personal story, and there is actually a scene where a character based on you, played by Olivia Colman, teaches an acting workshop, and it is very much about that exploration of the body. Was that something that came from Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, or was that an earlier part of your work?
That particular exercise that's in Jimpa that Olivia's character does is certainly an exercise that I've used a bit, and it's a kind of exercise in attention. It can be used for all different things, and sometimes it's simply to like be able to look at each other. I do a lot of things that allow actors to look at each other, and it's also an exercise in like speaking and seeing without judgment. So a big part of it is to describe something without saying it's beautiful, it's nice, or which we love to do. If you're asked to describe somebody and they're there, you kind of want to praise them in that. But in some ways, sometimes we just want to see each other. We were exploring the character being a filmmaker, and so we were looking at more parts than just what it feels like to be on set, but the kind of other things that you might do. And I think Matt wrote that scene and we changed it a bunch of times. It used to be further in the film and now it opens the movie, actually. But yeah, it is taken directly from things that I do.
For those who haven't seen Jimpa during its festival run and maybe looking to see it in theatres, what is the film about, and what made you come back to this story after directing other people's work more recently?
Yeah, Jimpa is about a filmmaker who takes a non-binary teenager to visit Amsterdam to stay with their gay, eccentric grandfather, Jim, or Jimpa. The teenager decides they want to stay there, and so it becomes kind of a rumination and a conversation about parenting and the past and identity, I guess. You know, you have like two queer characters, grandfather who kind of comes from the AIDS activist sort of movement, and a trans non-binary teenager navigating a relationship with each other, and then a kind of parent figure in between those two. It is largely inspired by elements of my life. You know, I have a father who was very much similar to Jimpa. In fact, he was called Jimpa. And a child who's a trans non-binary teenager who plays that character in the film. So on the surface, these things are like very much our life, you know, on screen. But they also are fictionalized versions of this. And we're looking at the idea of stories and who gets to tell them, and how we navigate that experience of being a parent and the disappointments of our life. Why did I choose to tell it? I don't know. I mean, it felt like a key into some ideas about being a human. I'm always really drawn to stuff that kind of like crosses the boundary between fiction and nonfiction, and the way you don't exactly know where that line is. I really like that kind of work in literature. I don't know if I ever really thought it would be quite as explicitly connected to us when we started doing it. I think I felt like it would shift away, and at times it did, and then it kind of came back. It's a strange and wonderful thing to do, to make something that's sort of so you're exploring your own personal ideas in, which I think we do in every film. I think in Leo Grande, I'm exploring my own stuff, and in Animals, I'm exploring my own stuff. It's just this one, the trappings are also us, so there's no hiding. And also, I think, you know, Ord being in it, it adds another layer to it.
What was it like working with them?
It was beautiful. Like, Ord's grown up in writers' rooms and on set, and it's a really natural space for them to be. And you know, we found this little video of them giving a tour of our back studio, which is where I am right now. And they were really little, like 10 or something. And they're like, that's where we do the writing. That's where we do the filming. You know, like, it's like they've been making films with us forever. So to have them be part of this was gorgeous. And they came into the writing of it. Once we knew we were writing this trans teenager, they kind of joined us in a lot of that conversation to make sure that that character was feeling right, or that we could explore concerns that felt interesting to them. So they were a part of it for a long time. And then working with them on set, I mean, I loved having them there. They're just like heavenly to me to be around because they're my child. It was amazing watching them being part of the acting team, and like finding that balance. And at times I wished I could take away some of the knowledge that they had. Like, I wish they didn't know that I'm stressed underneath, or I wish they didn't understand all the things they understand. I wish they could just be an actor here. But they're also a great collaborator, and some actors are like that. I mean, working with Tilda was always like that too. Certain actors collaborate with you in this really strong way. So yeah, it was gorgeous. It was beautiful.
Is there anything that you will always do in a rehearsal process or always do on set to create the environment that you want?
Hmm. I mean, I'll always have a rehearsal, and that rehearsal is much less about sort of doing scenes than it is about us forming something together, a relationship with each other, the cast and me. And that's really important to me so that when we start on set, we come in as a unified team, that we don't feel like outsiders to our own set. Yeah, it always varies. There's always a slight difference in everything I do. Some of it works and some of it doesn't.
Yeah, you've spoken a lot about experimenting and knowing when something's right and then changing it if it's not. How do you know if it's not right? And do you have any tools to change, or is it a matter of doing the opposite of what you were doing in the first place?
I think sometimes you just go like, "Oh, this isn't working, this exercise," and you just have to be ready to adapt. Sometimes you keep going with something, you think, "This is exactly not what I wanted to do," but I'm so far through it that I'll just see, like, I'll just have to, like, talk about that afterwards. Like, occasionally, you do these things called body checks, which are kind of like from intimacy coordinators where you check in with each other, and it's a bit more of a set process, and everyone does them a bit differently. But just occasionally, we'll do a body check, and I'll think, "Oh, no, that got a bit charged," just when it's supposed to not get charged, and I'm like, "Huh." So I have to kind of find a way to break that a little.
Can you just explain what a body check is?
A body check is you sort of talk to each other before you touch each other about, like, these are the boundaries I might have today. Like, I'd be happy to be touched, anywhere on my arms, my legs, but not, anywhere on my torso. Or you might be like, actually, I'm fine today. Like, I feel really free. And then you will often do an exercise where you ask to touch the other person and then they say yes, and you can do it and you can test different versions like pressing or hugging or stroking or whatever. They're designed so that if you're uncomfortable or you might have a history with any kind of like triggery kind of stuff in your life, or you're just nervous or whatever, that you can kind of find a way to that's comfortable so that you can get to a place where you know what your boundaries are and physically between the two of you. So looking after and respecting people. In terms of like how you know that it's wrong, I mean, I hope that you have a feeling of when things go wrong. I suspect there are times for all of us, and myself included, where things have not gone well for someone else and I don't even know. I would hope that I have enough trust and openness with the team that they would tell me. But sometimes you don't even know yourself, I think. And it's an interesting business. You just kind of hope that you can feel when something's uncomfortable. I had an intimacy coordinator working with me on Jimpa in the Netherlands, and she was so fantastic. She had this great graph that was about when you're really comfortable and happy and content, you're like a green. And then it's like when you're uncomfortable, or you might be like stretching yourself, or you might be starting to feel weird, or there's this orange sort of space, and then there's red, which obviously is like, this is no good and you never want to be in red. But she was like, we also don't want to be in green. Like, we don't want to be in green and being like, everyone's fine, but no one's actually pushing anything. So she talked about that kind of orange space as being really important to work out between you all, so that you are creatively going to the places you want to go, and going like, "Oh, am I comfortable with this? Yeah, actually I am." Really questioning yourself rather than just being like, "I will never do that. I don't want to ever feel uncomfortable in any way." And so I think that's kind of like all of the things that we do. It feels like that. You want to be in the orange.
Do you feel like there are aspects of every job that do stretch you into that orange place?
Yeah, and you never know what they're going to be. And it's fun. Part of the sort of challenge or the fear is a good part of it. I also am someone that works really well from safe places too. Like, I don't work well on a set where there's a lot of conflict. When you see Jimpa, that will be even funnier because it is about conflict, of course. But I don't work well in those teams. Some people really like there to be big deadlines, a lot of stress, like a lot of things going on that push them into a place of creativity. I don't work great like that, but I want to feel like the risk I'm taking is emotional, is creative, is about us aiming for something, reaching for something. That's the orange space.
It's so fascinating. I mean, I don't think everyone does this, but I think it makes sense in the case of actors because so much of acting is about exploring emotion and relationships and vulnerabilities. How do you then translate that into the way that you work as a director with your craftspeople or your technical team?
Yeah, it is quite a different space. And I think I ask for my key creatives to join me a bit in that space, to be engaged emotionally with the work and with me and sometimes with the cast. And so I invite them into different kinds of processes, like offering a space where we might share images and talk about what we're drawn to, or where we might have meals or workshops together to kind of do things. And that works really well for most of them, and occasionally it doesn't work for somebody. It's a really varied thing because some people are aching for that stuff. They're on set going like, I want to be part of this. And some people just don't. And that's good. Like they're craftspeople in a different way and they are there for their skills and expertise. What I try and do is recognize that everyone is there for those things because they are talented, because they're skilled, because they have expertise in an area, and that those things are all part of what we're making. Not everyone has to bring their kind of emotional energy into that. I don't think that would be helpful. They also don't have to leave it aside. Like they can be emotional humans. I think that's good on a set. I think the idea that we're like machines is kind of crazy. I think I ask for my crew to recognize that whatever we do, whatever we create, if the cast can't get to the place they need to in front of the camera, we don't really get what we're all working towards. And so I ask them to help generate and set the feeling for like a scene and the tone of it and the kind of actors that they are, and to be led by the actors a bit, led by that feeling, so that, when the actors walk onto set, you don't really kind of keep talking about the weekend or whatever. Like you kind of give it some reverence, and that there are other times where that's fine and it's fun and you do that. So I do ask a fair amount from the crew. I'll always do a thing where I invite the crew to kind of bring themselves to the work as well, and invite the crew to kind of be part of what we're doing, the purpose of what we're doing. I do tend to do things like, have a big purpose wall that we write things on, and like on Jimpa, the crew would come in and sometimes be part of a few of those exercises. But it's very hard to do that stuff. It's very hard to take a crew out of the kind of model that they're in and the treadmill that they're on to get the job done. But I do love it when we get to do that, and feel like we're all part of something together.
And is that part of your hiring process or your decision-making process when you bring crew on board? Is it a conversation or is it you just gauging how you feel in their presence during an interview?
I don't get to bring everyone on, but I certainly have that conversation with everyone about their teams, that we are looking for diversity in its biggest sense, as in like we're looking for a diversity of point of view and experience and abilities and perspectives mostly. And we're looking for humans that are going to be in it with us and respectful of each other. And we can't have bullying and we can't have really negative behavior on set. Like those things are really important. So we do talk a lot about that in the crewing process. It's an amazing thing to lead a bunch of people who are all kind of coming at it from different places and for different reasons. I think that's the biggest thing, isn't it? It's like going, this is what I need, and that's what we're here for, is to make this thing. But trying to be respectful of everyone's different place that they come from.
Yeah, and if you want that diversity of perspectives and experiences on your set, then you need to accept that not everyone is going to work in exactly the same way.
Exactly. And in fact, it can be really good as long as there's things that you're like, these are non-negotiable things for me on my set, like looking after actors in a certain way and not being assholes to each other.
I think even just taking the time to set your expectations for culture can go a huge way.
Yeah, and I think one thing is, when we're making films where like we build up a whole thing and then we end it, and then we build up again a few years later, and then we end it. And the one thing that would be amazing to do is to kind of have a consistency across that, so that you could keep that going and be like, did that work this time? Can we help this person be able to get there easier? Or did we not give everyone here enough space and time? I would love to do that. Like that idea of kind of working in a sort of ensemble model like a theatre company does or used to would be so amazing for those reasons, I think. The ability for that core team to be across more of the choices and part of the understanding, not just running their own departments. I would always want that to happen.
Thank you so much, Sophie. It's been amazing to chat with you. We always end the podcast asking our guests if they have one big idea to shape the future of the Australian screen industry, what it would be. So do you have a big idea?
I mean, I had other ideas in mind, but they were a little close to this. But after our conversation, I feel like my big idea would be that we would be able to create companies with people that are filmmakers in them making films, as in not companies necessarily just of producers who have to raise money each time, but like the arts do, where you have like an ensemble of filmmakers who work together, maybe actors as well, and you create together. You stay with each other. And I suppose like when you asked me that question, I thought, you know what I'd love? A universal basic income, like Ireland's just put in place for their artists. I'd love to see what we all made if it was like, you're fine, you can survive. Like, what do you really want to spend your time researching and making? And now that we can shoot on pieces of equipment that we often have around or that we can get access to, are there different things that we would start to make if it wasn't always about bigger budgets, more reach? And that's maybe just a selfish thing that I'm craving right now.
Thank you so much for such a beautiful conversation.
Thank you. It's been excellent.
We Interrupt This broadcast is recorded on the unceded lands of the
Gadigal people of the Eora Nation,
the Turrbal and Yagara people,
The Yukambeh language people,
and the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and we acknowledge them as the traditional custodians and first storytellers of these regions.
always was, always will be.